In 1954, the CIA director authorizing the overthrow of Guatemala's elected government held stock in the company that stood to benefit from it. His brother had spent 20 years as that company's lawyer. The operation was called PBSUCCESS. The success was entirely theirs. In 1899, two fruit trading companies merged in Boston to form the United Fruit Company. At the time, the press called it an agricultural achievement, a logistical marvel that would bring cheap, nutritious produce to American tables year-round. The company built ports, railroads, and telegraph lines across Central America, in places where none had existed. Honduran newspapers praised it. Costa Rican officials welcomed it. On paper, it looked like development. What the papers did not print were the contract terms. Between 1900 and 1930, United Fruit negotiated directly with 6 Central American governments and extracted concessions that no sovereign nation had ever granted a private corporation before. In Honduras in 1912, the government ceded 500,000 acres of the country's most fertile land in exchange for United Fruit, completing a railroad it had already stopped building. In Guatemala, the company paid zero income tax under a deal locked in during the Estrada Cabrera dictatorship and carried forward untouched through 4 successive governments. In Costa Rica, it held a legal monopoly on the Atlantic Coast telegraph infrastructure. The terms were not buried in subsidiary agreements. They were written into the national concession frameworks, some directly into constitutional statutes. Renegotiating them required an act of parliament that United Fruit's local legal teams would immediately contest. The company also controlled something less visible than land: transit. At its peak, United Fruit owned the only refrigerated cargo fleet operating in the Caribbean, 119 ships, registered across multiple flags. It owned the only rail lines connecting most Guatemalan and Honduran interior regions to the coast. If a government wanted to move goods, it moved them on United Fruit's terms. The company called this vertical integration. Economists studying it later used a different phrase: captive economy. Guatemalan farmers who did not work for United Fruit still depended on United Fruit Rail to reach any market. The infrastructure looked like a public good. The pricing schedule confirmed it was not. Then in 1951, Jacobo Arbenz won the Guatemalan presidency with 65% of the vote and announced Decree 900, an agrarian reform law that would redistribute idle land to 500,000 landless farmers. The government offered compensation. The figure was 620,572. That number came directly from the value United Fruit had declared on its own tax assessments, the same assessments it had used for decades to minimize its tax burden. United Fruit countered with a claim of $15.8 million. The gap between those two numbers, between what the company told tax authorities and what it told the State Department, was not an accounting discrepancy. It was the architecture of the entire arrangement, finally made visible. By 1930, United Fruit Company controlled 3.5 million acres across Central America, not leased, owned or functionally owned through concession agreements that exempted the company from property taxes for periods ranging from 25 to 99 years. The Guatemalan concession signed in 1904 under President Manuel Estrada Cabrera granted United Fruit not just land, but the exclusive right to operate the only Atlantic railroad in the country and the only telegraph lines running to the coast. Any Guatemalan merchant who wanted to move goods to a port used United Fruit infrastructure at United Fruit prices. Any Guatemalan government that wanted to communicate with its own coastal provinces sent messages through United Fruit wires. The company did not occupy Guatemala. It was woven into it. The mechanism worked because the legal architecture was built before the governments were strong enough to resist it. Sullivan and Cromwell, the New York law firm, drafted the original concession agreements. Their client was United Fruit. Their partner was John Foster Dulles. His brother Allen Dulles sat on United Fruit's board of directors from 1950 onward and became Director of Central Intelligence in 1953. When Guatemalan President Jacobo Arbenz passed Decree 900 in June 1952, expropriating 387,000 acres of idle United Fruit land to redistribute to 100,000 landless families, the company's appraised value for that land was $627,572. The Guatemalan government offered exactly that amount in compensation, precisely the value United Fruit had declared for tax purposes. The company then demanded $15.8 million. The gap between those two numbers is the distance between what United Fruit told the government and what it told itself. The State Department knew the internal record is not ambiguous. A 1952 State Department memorandum drafted by Assistant Secretary Edward Miller acknowledged that Decree 900 was legally consistent with Guatemalan constitutional provisions and targeted idle land specifically. The memo was filed. No action followed. What followed instead was a covert action budget of $2.7 million authorized in August 1953 under the CIA operation designated PBSUCCESS. Alan Dulles signed the authorization. The lobbying cables that preceded it came from United Fruit's own public relations operation, run by Edward Bernays, who had already spent years placing stories in American newspapers framing Arbenz as a Soviet asset. At least 3 major wire services ran Bernays-sourced material without attribution. The story that reached American readers was not journalism. It was product. The human cost landed on the workers first, then spread outward. United Fruit's plantation labor in Guatemala in 1954 earned between 50 cents and $1 per day. The company paid no income tax, no export tax, and no import duty under the 1936 concession renewal. Guatemalan workers had no collective bargaining rights on company land because company land operated under company rules, not Guatemalan labor law. When Arbenz's land reform began distributing parcels, some families farmed legal title to soil for the first and only time in their lives. Those titles were nullified within days of the June 27, 1954 coup. The military junta that replaced Arbenz returned all expropriated land to United Fruit by executive decree before the end of July. The families lost the land. The records of who had received it were destroyed. The point of no return was not the coup itself. It was March 26, 1954, the date the CIA's psychological warfare team launched Radio Shtick, a covert broadcast station, transmitting inside Guatemala under a false Guatemalan military signal. From that date, the operation was irreversible. Too many assets were active, too many foreign governments had been briefed, too much money had moved. Arbenz was not overthrown on June 27th. He was overthrown in March, in a room most Guatemalans never knew existed, by men whose names did not appear on any ballot, and whose employer was not the United States government. Their employer had a railroad, a telegraph line, and 3.5 million acres. The government was the product. The country was the business. Alan Dulles never testified under oath about Operation PBSUCCESS. His brother John Foster Dulles, who had personally drafted United Fruit's land contracts as a Sullivan Cromwell partner, died as Secretary of State in 1959 with no investigation pending. The CIA did not declassify its operational records on the 1954 Guatemalan coup until 1997, 43 years after Jacobo Arbenz walked out of the National Palace in his underwear, stripped by a military that United Fruit had helped arm. The Church Committee in 1975 examined CIA covert operations broadly, but left the corporate architecture underneath untouched. No executive of United Fruit was ever charged. No contract was ever voided. Guatemala spent the following 4 decades in a civil war that killed an estimated 200,000 people, the majority of them indigenous Mayan civilians. A United Nations Truth Commission in 1999 classified acts committed during that war as genocide. United Fruit by then had rebranded as Chiquita Brands International. The name change cost nothing. The land grant model United Fruit pioneered, tax exemption written into host nation law, private infrastructure monopolies insulated from regulation, and the diplomatic machinery of a foreign government available as a backstop, did not end in 1954. It became a template. The legal architecture Sullivan and Cromwell built for United Fruit is the direct ancestor of modern bilateral investment treaties, which today allow corporations to sue sovereign governments in private arbitration panels for passing laws that reduce anticipated profits. As of 2024, over 3,000 of these treaties are in force. No electorate voted on any of them. The difference between 1900 and now is not the system. The difference is the paperwork is cleaner. What happened in Guatemala was not an accident of the Cold War. The Cold War was the explanation offered afterward. The sequence was simple. A democratically elected president passed a land reform law in 1952. United Fruit lobbied the State Department. The CIA director who sat on United Fruit's board authorized an operation, and a government was destroyed. The land Arbenz tried to tax is still largely uncultivated. The question that has never been formally answered is how many other governments made the same quiet calculation and simply never passed the law. What do you think? When a corporation's legal contracts outlast the governments that sign them, where does sovereignty actually live? Drop your answer below. If this is the kind of history they hoped you would never piece together, subscribe. Because every week we expose another system they built in plain sight and counted on you to ignore.